Hey everyone, welcome back to our podcast. I am Kelly Birmingham. This is a 25-year look across the spectrum is the name of our podcast. And I started it because I originally had been in the field of working with adults and children with autism and disabilities 25 years ago. It's now 28 years ago. And I've been a certified BCBA for 20 years. And with me, as always, is my partner in crime, Jen, mom to Dylan and Ethan. Hey, Jen.
Hey, Kelly, pretty soon you're gonna have to change it to 30 years
I
across the
know.
spectrum.
I am going to. And so if you're new to our podcast, we take topics related to the field or concepts of autism and developmental disabilities and talk about them from a BCBA perspective and a caregiver perspective. So you always bring the perspective, Jen.
I
So
try.
before we dive into the podcast, I'd like to give a shout out to our sponsor, SitePro. SitePro offers a wide range of engaging and practical continuing education courses developed by BCBAs for BCBAs. You can visit their website at sitepro.com to see the complete CEU library, including our podcasts, which you can listen to for free on demand. So we appreciate SitePro for putting our podcast out on the platform. All
Awesome.
right. I know. Isn't that great? Free.
Yes, amazing.
It was just, she liked what we were doing and said, can we get the content out there? And I said, you got it. I also do have a number of paid webinars on there, and Jen and I did one over the holidays, so you can check us out there. Okay, so I was thinking about this topic because I work at Easter Seals, Southern California, and one thing Easter Seals does really well is take data on quality of life. There's a World Health Organization questionnaire on quality of life, and Easter Seals does that. But what happens is that the quality of life survey, you have to be able to talk to answer it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about quality of life. That's something you and I always talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Research suggests that, and we've talked about this before, individuals on the spectrum experience a much lower quality of life than non-autistic individuals across the lifespan.
Mm-hmm.
Some research says that. And so, when we talk about quality of life, what are some of the things we always say? You have to be
Happy,
healthy,
healthy, and safe.
safe. Yep.
Yep.
So happiness, right? Yeah, happy. And
Mm-hmm.
so happiness is, went down this research rabbit hole a little bit, and happiness is often an indicator of quality of life,
Mm-hmm.
right? Happier you are in general, the better you feel about your life. The thing is, is that most measures of quality of life are either a self-report, like us asking the individual, asking the caregiver, rating things on a Likert scale. And that made me immediately think, and that's why we're actually doing a study replication. What if you can't answer any of those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if you can't say, I like these things? What if you can't answer a Likert scale?
Mm-hmm.
And there's also research that caregivers tend to underestimate happiness and quality of life for the people they're caring for.
Totally agree.
Yeah,
Yep.
right? Do you agree with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sure, I've been guilty of that. Definitely toward in the beginning too.
Yeah. Yeah, the research seems pretty clear that proxy reports, meeting caregivers, there's often a tendency to underestimate things, particularly happiness. So, we go down the rabbit hole. So we are replicating a study by Reed and Green, which was, I had the dates, 1969, and then a Ramsey group in 2020, I think. I'll plop them in the notes. I'm sorry, I forgot to write the dates down in my notes here. I'll put links to those studies in the session notes. But Easter Seals, we're replicating them. But with individuals with severely impacted, profoundly impacted on the autism spectrum. And so we got thinking about it because we're putting together the methods right now and how we're going to do this. And one of the things that come up is behavior analyst. And I know I'm a long talk to get to the part for you, Jen, but how do you measure happiness, right? Or mood? And so behavior analysts would call happiness and mood a private event, a private thought that is not an observable, quantifiable behavior, right? And so we were talking about this. That personally, I have challenges with that in our field, but these two studies looked at happiness and measured it individually, but looked at where you could observe if someone seemed happy by smiles, right? Laughter,
Mhm.
gaze towards something, and then maybe even engagement in something,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, it totally makes sense.
Doesn't it? And so, like for
Mhm.
Dylan, how would you
Mhm.
measure happiness and from like an observable behavior? Because he can't tell you, like, he's not going to say,
Mhm.
I'm really happy, mom. Sometimes maybe,
Mhm.
but he's not going to say,
Mhm.
I have good quality of life, mom.
Mhm.
How do you measure
Well,
happiness with Dylan?
well, he's definitely like he definitely is very animated, like where he does smile a lot, he giggles, he does like he does a squeal, like he was
Mm-hmm.
doing it today. He actually does attend a separate Easter
Mm-hmm.
sale. It's a adult day program, and like I go through the door and he comes around the corner and I can hear him. And I know that means that he had a good day. Like, but I know, other people are probably like, what is happening? So that, there's like sounds and and then body language. As you know, he's done a thing always when he's super happy, he'll like throw his arms in the air
Yeah.
and he just kind of like this, we call it the Dylan dance,
Yep. I've seen it
kind of
marked
like
up.
hopping around and
Mm-hmm.
like, so that kind of thing. And then he does, talk a tiny bit, but it's
Mm-hmm.
more, short phrases. But when he's definitely happy a lot, all of a sudden it'll be like he likes to say "Hi, mommy" to me,
Mm-hmm.
like, but over and over. Hi, and like just super random. I'll be driving, "Hi, mommy," and I'm like, "Okay, hi, Don." And he's like smiles, and then he keeps saying it, and I know that means he's happy. So we stuff like that. Or sometimes he just cracks up
Yes.
and you know that something's in his head and
Yep.
he's just like thinks something's like the greatest thing ever. So
So
I would say those are the main things.
that's funny because in one of the research articles, they talked about some autistic individuals that engage in non-textual laughter, which is what you just
Mhm.
described.
Yeah,
And this article, they said that might not be an indicator of happiness. And I disagreed just
I
because
definitely think it is for
like
him.
you can laugh about a thought you're thinking about, right? It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be
Well,
contextual.
don't you do that
Yeah,
sometimes? Like even
absolutely.
sometimes I'll think of something maybe I saw the night before or something, then it just kind of I do a chuckle to myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the point the article was trying to make was if someone is smiling and laughing, how do you know it's actually true happiness, right? I don't know that answer, but one would indicate likely smiling and laughter,
Hmm.
a squeal with a smile is an indicator of happiness, as for sake of
Hmm.
argument. And then it kind of went on to talk about like what are things that typically make people happy, and it certainly is relationships, but it was
Hmm.
also like for all of us, like quality of life, like an ability to have an outlet, like leisure activities to get away from work, like recreational community activities to get
Hmm.
out of like your mundane routine.
Yeah.
And one of the things we're finding is that like a lot of kids have very limited both leisure, and for leisure, I'm going to talk about like everyday things they might engage in, like at home, like, like for leisure activities for myself, I like to listen to music.
Hmm.
I like to sort of like putter, if you will, that's the East Coast word, around my house, like make sure everything's neat and organized. And then
Hmm.
recreation would be like things you go out and do. And
Hmm.
Dylan has a huge repertoire of both. And as I'm going through this study, I'm like, oh my God, like all the families I'm seeing that don't do it, and ABA providers that are not programming this,
Hmm.
right? And aren't considering that what impact of quality of life this is. So can we use Dylan? Like, let's talk about his
Yeah. Well,
leisure skills at home and how you got there.
I think part of it, like with people, both the families and probably the professional, everybody is like the fear, what
Yep.
could happen. And so people tend to hide out and
Yep.
just like, I think that's part of why. I mean, I'm guessing.
Good
I
point.
will say I was kind of like made a choice early on because I have Ethan, who's 23 months younger. So for better for worse, like we from day one made sure that we were out doing things and engaging and trying to find things, even if it was short spans of time that would help all of us. and help Dylan, you know, for happiness and some outlets. So, and you know, he definitely has things that he really enjoys. And you know, you can do little things up to extremes, right? Like now, like he loves animals, always has. So
Yeah.
we have, you know, go to like the local zoos or aquariums, even small ones, tiny ones. We have memberships everywhere, right?
Right.
Or, but even down to, you know, go to a park or see something or go pet, you know, whatever. He goes and then he ended up liking to go and did some job training at like the OC animal shelter, things like that. And now like if there's brief moments, if we have times to do stuff, like we live off a golf course and there's always like Canadian, he calls them Canada goose. Like he likes to go out there and see them. We have a lot of rabbits out there, but we'll take like, we have this neighborhood cat named Charlie who's like everybody's cat. He's like an outdoor guy. But if he sees Dylan, he comes running and he'll walk with us around the
Wow.
neighborhood. And like he lets Dylan's like all over him. But that's like an example or
Can I pause you for a
yeah,
second?
sure.
So in my mind, or at least
Mhm.
literature kind of just talked about recreation versus leisure.
Mhm.
And when you're so I love that you took that Dylan loves all kinds of animals and you're like, what can I do with this? And you expanded it to like large scale zoos and petting
Mhm.
zoos to even to like walking with seeking out the neighborhood cat
Mhm.
and the neighborhood ducks and rabbits. Um, and how did you just know to do that? Like a lot of families don't know how to do that. A lot of ABA providers. So like that's all community-based work, but taking an interest and like expanding it on all those levels. How did you know to do that?
Well, I mean, even since a little kid, he like if he picks out books, like you know, he would
Hmm.
gravitate to animals.
Hmm.
He talks or you know, he as you know, he if he was like gonna get something or ask for something, he liked figurines that were
Yes.
like animals and
Hmm.
like he memorized like it's like that is one thing that he will talk about. He knows like different animals or you know the computer like sometimes he just looks up animals and stuff. So taking like that interest and like you know and I mean there's a million things you can do with that at home
A
too, you know.
million.
Yeah.
Well, so
You
for
know,
like,
and we used to have an easel. This could be some. Remember the easel we had in our house,
I
and we
do.
had one board. One side was chalkboard, and one side was like, well, hopefully dry erase markers. And like he would totally sit there,
Yep.
and sometimes he would hold one of the figurine animals, or sometimes he's just drawing it, but he's very serious and he's taking a long time. And then I'd be like, what is that? And then he'd be like, that's, you know, an elephant or something. So, like, taking small things and, you know, finding their interests and making it, or like, let's say it's going to be Easter this Sunday. Like, I found we're going to do, you know, we're going to dye eggs, but I found things that the theme were like safari. Somehow I found animal things, you
Of
know,
course you
whether
did.
they're stickers or like some things like that, you know, that the things you can put around them and everything. So like to me that falls into it, you know?
Yeah. So for like practitioners listening, recreational are like activities and places you go
Mm-hmm.
out and do. And so like personally, Melanie, my stepdaughter, also loves
Mm-hmm.
animals. So
Mm-hmm.
something as simple as going to the beach and looking for crabs or like in a
Yeah.
tide pool, going to the zoo,
Mm-hmm.
going on a hike and spotting how many different like wildlife things we could see. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that and I was thinking talking to another family the other day, and the child had high interest in letters. And I'm like, well, let's do something with this, right? And
Mm-hmm.
maybe we go walking around an outdoor mall and identify different letters on the
Mm-hmm.
shops, and then go into the bookstore and look at a letter book. And like there are lots of things to do that out recreationally that you
Yeah, it
have to be
doesn't take a
planned.
lot of time or money or
Mhm.
like planning. Yeah, you can find stuff like that all the time or build your own like mini scavenger hunt or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's a
there's tons of apps and stuff too. I mean, not that you want to, yeah, but I think it's fine to mix it up, you know, if there's interest and there's stuff. like he loves it. Also, there are a lot of things I like the program, and I know they used to use it in school, and I've seen them use it at the adult day program, and is Cahoots, and
Yes.
like it's
Hmm.
different. And he's like the freaking master on that thing, man. He's like answering it, I swear, before it almost seems like it comes up. Like, but there's a lot of different
Describe
themes and
Cahoots
stuff
for
you can
people
do.
who haven't heard of it.
It's an app, and it'll come up with like 20 questions, and it's based on a category. Um, and so for animals, it could be like, what animal lives in the safari or whatever, and there'll be four like multiple choice things, but they'll have a visual with it too. And then you push which one you think it is, or you can say it. It depends, what level. But he will do it and answer it like himself, and he will knock it out. Like
That's
if it's Disney villains or animals or something, he's like, like boom.
so that takes us to like
Uh,
the leisure category, sort of how I saw like the research and I looked
mhm,
up like how psychology measures it. It's like recreation, which are things you
mhm,
don't do every day. You like, but you get out and those add to quality of life. Like you telling me you walking on the beach with Dylan and him smiling. And then there's
mhm,
leisure things which you can do more often and more frequently and have access to. So in my mind, that's exactly like drawing his animals, drawing his
mhm.
characters,
Yeah.
answering that app. What other kind of at-home leisure things does he do? And I know for a fact at home his leisure, like I know he goes to the movies. He loves every
Mhm.
Friday he's at the
Yeah,
movies
he's
and he
everywhere. Yeah.
bookstores, but his leisure activities at home tend to be a little bit younger, but that's okay
Mhm.
because he's home enjoying himself and
Yeah.
smiling. So
Well, it's funny when we just talked about animals. So I work for Special Olympics, most people know, and we do these events called Tipicots. So it's law enforcement, and we go to a restaurant and they come and they serve with our athletes. And Dylan likes to go to that. That's a total leisure thing. I will tell you that makes him very happy. Yeah,
recreational activity.
recreational food is involved. Like he loves cops. He wants to sit in the police car. Like he's super into it. Last night it was sheriff's department and firefighters. Well, I of course I wasn't working it, but a colleague was, and they have a table out when you first walk up. Well, the guy was just setting up, and he had a bag because some of it's like you make a donation, and then you can pick like a incentive, of what you want for it. And there's a bag of rubber duckies, and they were all different. Like some were police, some were sheriffs, some are firefighters. They're all
Cool.
like, there's probably like five different ones. So Dylan, totally unprompted, like said hi, and then he just saw him, and he's like, I gotta get organized here because he's an organizer. He took them all out, and he on his
Wind him
own,
up.
he started itemized him, had him
Categorizing.
perfectly lined up, like, and the guy was like, oh, thank you,
Yeah.
Dylan, but to Dylan, like that was super rewarding. And
That's
like I know back in the day, people would be like, do not let him line things up. But you know what? It was totally functional because that's what the
absolutely.
guy was going to do,
Yep.
you know?
I totally agree with that. And so like what are some other things he does at home when he's just like on his own and you just know he's enjoying himself, he's happy and he's safe and you don't have to be interacting
Oh
with him.
yeah, well, he has like a pretty organized thing. Two things. One's in the garage. He has a ton of books. And a lot of those could be, animal related or whatever. Definitely, there's different categories. And he usually has them in different categories, like if it's Disney or whatever. And then he also has we have this weird English phone booth, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a ton of DVDs and VHS tapes and CDs in there, and he likes to organize those, but he likes to pull out um like the inserts of things,
Mm-hmm.
like the CDs that he calls them maps, but it's really just like you know, sometimes it has like all the songs and sometimes it has the lyrics and stuff. But he looks at stuff and he likes to memorize it. And
Mhm.
so that he loves music, he'll listen to music,
Mhm.
he does that on his own. He has a couple of different ways of doing that. And then he does still draw a lot. He has like different art stuff and he'll do his thing with that. He's been sometimes he just chills out. Like I feel like I've been trying to teach him like kind of a form of meditation and stuff. So sometimes he'll put music on and be relaxing even though he's awake. I mean, so there's just some I think like
Fantastic.
self-soothing stuff to like because he has a very busy day and
He does.
schedule, you
Mhm.
know, and then just organizing like he likes to
He
like
likes
get
to
things ready for like what's next. Like he if he knows he's gonna see my parents for the weekend, he goes out, he gets excited about it, but he goes and he picks out like multiple, he knows how many days he's going. He picks out all of his clothes, his jammies. He has like a toiletry bag. And they're all different parts of the house and he gets all organized, you know, stuff
and
like that.
that's a
And
leisure
that
act.
makes him happy.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's leisure act. That's like me walking around my house, getting everything organized,
Mhm.
right? It's a leisure activity. And
Yeah.
so sort of like as we close out this latest podcast on quality of life, and we're talking about what makes people happy, that one of the things I do see is kids and adults, well, we all do it, too much time on our phone or tablets. And you just described this like well-rounded lifestyle that Dylan has
Hmm.
that makes him very like he's a happy kid. He's adult
Hmm.
rather. He's
Yeah.
laughing and smiling and squealing and dancing a lot.
Yeah.
And right? And you allow him to do some of the organization and lining up of things because it makes him happy. Who cares?
Yeah.
Right?
Especially if it's at home.
That's
But
right.
like last night, it was totally appropriate.
Functional, translated into such a functional
And
activity.
he would have been bummed and he wouldn't have been happy. And no one would have been happy if I was like, why are you doing that? Stop it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So for parents and like BCBAs listening to this, like it, the research talks about that there's low quality of life. Um, Happiness is a way to measure quality of life, and you can measure it for someone who can't report it by smile. They're observable behaviors, and that the way in general most of us like decompress from the stress of our lives are leisure activities, which are generally at home activities that are fairly repetitive. And by repetitive, I mean things you can do frequently and often. And then there's also recreational things that happen less often, but tend to be like community oriented. And it just struck me that as I'm going through all this research and we're interviewing families and I'm talking to families, not enough BCBAs, ABA providers are talking to families about quality of life in general and happiness for that child. And so I'm hopefully you've got some great ideas from this, but also not a lot of families that they're hiding out at home and they're not
Yeah.
thinking of it either. And sometimes they're so tired they just want to break, but
Oh, and I understand that for
right.
sure.
But you like totally represent like it totally popped on when I was doing this work. Like I got to talk to Jen on the podcast about this because there's not enough about this going on. And
Yeah.
our next podcast, we're actually going to have our researcher, the research director from Easter Seals, who actually is presenting on quality of life studies
Oh,
and who
cool.
brought out to our attention that the way we typically measure quality of life is like asking kids, but what about those that can't tell you?
Mm-hmm. For sure.
So she's going to join us too.
Nice.
So, quick question. What percentage of 24 hours, if you took a 24-hour day, what percentage of that is Dylan happy? Or maybe we rule out the sleep time. So let's say out of a 14-hour day he's awake, what percentage do you think is he happy right now in his life on the average?
Um, Probably at least I would say at least 10.
Only 10% happy?
Or 10 hours.
Oh,
I
10 hours
bet.
out of
Yeah,
14.
yeah,
I can't
yeah.
do the math. So we're like getting like 80
Maybe
hours.
80%,
80%, I mean, yeah.
85. I don't know. It could be higher. I definitely don't think it's lower.
That's awesome. And
Yeah.
if parents tend to underestimate that, I mean he could be even a little bit
Hmm.
happy. So for all intents and purposes, Dylan has a very happy, positive quality of life right now.
He sure does. He's
That's
a
awesome.
busy dude. He's at the movies right now.
What's
Kung
he
Fu
seeing?
Panda 4 for the 4th time.
Good for him. Well, this
Yes,
was a great topic. Thank you, everyone who listened. I'll put research and the research articles in the session notes. And remember, happy life is a good life.
for sure. Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.